Hello, and welcome back to Soft Light History. Tonight we won't be reading from the history books you know. We'll be listening to a silence that stretches back 10,000 years into a world that our modern minds can barely grasp. A world before writing, before bronze, before even agriculture as we understand it. Close your eyes, breathe deeply. Imagine a darkness, not the darkness of night, but the deep, comfortable darkness of deep time. What if the stories we tell about the past, the neat lines of civilization rising from simple hunter-gatherers, are actually just the very, very last chapters of a much longer, much grander, and completely forgotten book? Tonight we journey to the very edge of the map, to where history surrenders to archaeology, and where the stone whispers of civilizations we were never supposed to find. We are looking for the ghosts of a time before time began, the archaeology of absence. When we study history in school, we are taught that civilization began roughly 6,000 years ago in Mesopotamia, with the invention of writing, the wheel, and the city. This is the recorded history that forms the basis of our modern understanding. But what lies just beyond that line? What happens when the written record simply vanishes? We enter a domain called prehistory, a period not defined by what we know, but by what we have forgotten. For centuries, archaeologists believed that before the Great Pyramids and the towering temples of Sumer, humanity was uniformly primitive. Small, scattered groups of hunter-gatherers focused entirely on survival. The monumental, the organized, the spiritual, these things were thought to be impossible without the stability of farming. Then, the dirt began to speak, and it told a very different tale. It told of a massive, organized society that built the oldest known structure on Earth in a period that should have been nothing but simple Stone Age wandering. This is the story of Göbekli Tepe, the hill of the potbelly. In the dusty, rolling plains of southeastern Turkey, near the city of Şanlıurfa, lies an unremarkable-looking hill. Its name, Göbekli Tepe, simply means potbelly hill in Turkish. For decades, it was dismissed as nothing more than a medieval cemetery. But in the 1990s, German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt began to dig. What he unearthed shattered the timeline of human development completely. Beneath the soil, perfectly preserved for 12,000 years, were massive, meticulously carved stone pillars. These were not crude stones. They were perfectly shaped T-pillars, standing up to 16 feet tall and weighing up to 20 tons. That's heavier than 2 large elephants. They were arranged in majestic, perfectly circular enclosures, like subterranean cathedrals. And these enclosures were not empty. The T-pillars were covered in intricate and stunning reliefs. Foxes, snakes, boars, vultures, spiders, and massive predatory cats. These carvings weren't random sketches. They showed a profound, complex, and sophisticated symbolic language, a mastery of art and engineering that belonged, according to every history book, 4,000 years later. Now this is where the mystery deepens and the light dims further. Göbekli Tepe was built around 9600 BCE. To put that into perspective for our American listeners, it is 7,000 years older than Stonehenge. It is 7,500 years older than the Great Pyramid of Giza. It was built before agriculture. The people who built this place were hunter-gatherers. They had no domesticated animals, no fixed settlements, no pottery, and most crucially, no farming. The old narrative was simple. People invent farming, they settle down, they create surplus food, they use the surplus to support priests, engineers, and builders, and they build temples. Göbekli Tepe flips the entire script. These people built the temple first. They organized the massive workforce necessary to quarry, move, and carve these stones for spiritual reasons before they had mastered the simple act of growing their own food. The temple preceded the city. Perhaps, as Klaus Schmidt suggested, The need to feed the thousands of workers who gathered at this site forced them to invent agriculture later on. The faith came first, the farm second. The silent burial and the lost knowledge. But the story doesn't end with its construction. It ends with a deliberate burial. After about 1,000 years of use, the people of Göbekli Tepe did something extraordinary. They entombed their own temple. They did not abandon it. They did not let it fall to ruin. They filled those magnificent circular chambers with millions of cubic feet of earth and rubble, burying their sacred sites, layer upon layer. They were not destroying it. They were preserving it, sealing it away for a time they knew they would not see. Why? Was it a dramatic shift in their belief system? Was it a conscious decision to lock away knowledge? Or were they facing a catastrophe that forced them to pack up their profound spiritual centers and move on? The silence of that intentional burial is the loudest evidence we have of a lost civilization before recorded history. A culture that achieved massive, organized, spiritual, and engineering feats, and then decided, perhaps for a reason we'll never know, to simply vanish from the geological record, leaving us only with that silent, buried whisper. We have only unearthed about 5% of the complex. 95% still lies beneath the Potbelly Hill, waiting to tell us the rest of the story.
We have explored the silence of Göbekli Tepe, a monument that stands as a deliberate challenge to everything we thought we knew about the rise of civilization. It proves that complex, monumental culture preceded settled farming. But if this culture was so advanced, why did they disappear? And why did they bury their masterpiece? To answer that, we must turn our attention to the time in which they lived, a crucial and turbulent period known to geologists as the Younger Dryas. This era, stretching roughly from 12,900 to 11,700 years ago, represents a geological event of such dramatic consequence that it may have acted as a great cosmic reset for human development worldwide. The world was already warming up after the last great ice age. Ice sheets across the northern hemisphere were melting, sea levels were rising, and humanity was tentatively stepping into a more lush and hospitable world. The people who built Göbekli Tepe were benefiting from this climate shift, thriving off abundant wild game and plants in what was then a fertile crescent. Then, suddenly, the warmth stopped. In a geological blink of an eye, perhaps in the span of just a single human lifetime, global temperatures plummeted back into an ice age-like state. This was not a gradual cooling. Evidence shows the temperatures dropped by as much as 20 degrees Fahrenheit in some regions of the North Atlantic. For the hunter-gatherer societies of the time, this climate shock was catastrophic. The forests vanished, the rainfall dried up, and the game disappeared. This sudden, dramatic reversal of global climate is the backdrop against which the ancient world was destroyed and reset. The Younger Dryas Impact Hypothesis. For decades, scientists debated the cause of this abrupt global chilling. Was it simply a massive flood of fresh cold water from melting glaciers pouring into the Atlantic, disrupting the ocean currents? That was the accepted theory. But in recent years, a more dramatic and compelling narrative has emerged, one that involves space, cosmic events, and a potential cataclysm that could have erased entire advanced populations. This is the Younger Dryas Impact Hypothesis. This theory posits that the sudden cooling was caused by an extraterrestrial event, a massive shower of comet fragments or a large asteroid striking the Earth's ice sheets. Imagine the effect. A cosmic impact on the vast North American ice sheets would have instantly vaporized massive amounts of water, created huge atmospheric clouds of superheated steam and dust, and triggered global wildfires. The soot and debris would have blanketed the Earth, plunging it into a cosmic winter by blocking the sun's light and heat. Archaeological evidence supports this dark theory. Scattered across at least 50 sites across North America and Europe, right at the beginning of the Younger Dryas period, archaeologists have found a distinctive layer of sediment. This layer contains a rare signature of cosmic impact: nanodiamonds, tiny spherical carbon particles, and high concentrations of platinum. These materials are not naturally produced on Earth in this fashion. They are the calling cards of a cosmic collision. If this hypothesis holds true, that a cometary impact plunged the planet into a sudden, deep freeze, it means that any advanced or semi-settled society thriving just before 10,900 BCE would have been catastrophically hit, not just by the cold, but by the impact and the subsequent global blackout. Could this be the great disaster that the builders of Göbekli Tepe feared? Did they bury their temple because they witnessed the sky fall and they knew the world was ending, sealing away their sacred knowledge for a future they hoped would remember them? The silence of their burial speaks volumes about a civilization facing not a slow decline, but an immediate, violent environmental collapse. The echoes in the myths. This period of global catastrophe may also be the root of some of our oldest, most persistent human myths. Think of the universal nature of the Great Flood story. Nearly every ancient culture, from the Sumerians and the Babylonians to the Native American tribes and the ancient Hebrews, has a narrative of a devastating, world-ending deluge that wiped the slate clean. For centuries, these were dismissed as simple local river floods. But when you place these stories against the backdrop of the Younger Dryas melting ice, global sea level rise, and potential cataclysmic impacts, they suddenly gain a terrifying resonance. If there were sophisticated, organized societies like the people of Göbekli Tepe or others yet to be discovered, their story would have been reduced to a single traumatized memory. The water rose, the sky turned dark, and everything was lost. These are not just charming old stories. They may be the last broken memories of the lost civilizations before recorded history. They are the whisper of a world that was drowned, frozen, or burnt into oblivion, leaving the survivors to start over with only fragmented memory. We are perhaps not the first advanced people, but the lucky inheritors of a world that was forcibly restarted.
We leave the wind-swept hills of Anatolia, where a great temple was deliberately buried, and travel across the vast oceans to the dry, dusty coast of South America. Here, in the Supe Valley of modern-day Peru, lies the archaeological site that further challenges the simplistic timeline of civilization, the ancient city of Caral. Imagine a landscape of barren hills, where the soil is dry and the sun is intense. It is here, overlooking the quiet Supe River, that a monumental city was established 4,600 years ago. Now, 4,600 years ago is old, but it seems to fall within the conventional timeline, around the time of the Egyptian Old Kingdom. However, Caral's significance lies not just in its age, but in what it lacked. Caral was a massive, complex, and highly organized urban center. Yet the people of Caral did not use pottery. They didn't have writing as we know it. Crucially, they had no wheel, and they possessed no known weapons or defensive structures. This was a sophisticated, peaceful, and ceremonial city built of stone and earth, existing long before the rise of the much later and more familiar Inca Empire. The Pyramids of Quiet Power. The heart of Caral is defined by its 6 magnificent sunken circular plazas and its massive earthen pyramids. These aren't the triangular pyramids of Egypt. They are enormous, stepped platforms of earth and carefully placed stone, known as wakas. The largest of these, the Piramide Mayor, is 4 stories high, built with millions of small stones carried in woven reed bags. This level of construction required immense organization, a single, centralized authority capable of directing thousands of laborers for years. This is the definition of a civilization. Yet they did this all without a single clay pot for storage.
without a system of writing for record-keeping, and without any evidence of warfare. Their power was not military, it was spiritual and economic. Coral's influence was based on trade. Lacking sophisticated agriculture in their dry valley, they specialized in growing cotton. This cotton was then traded with coastal fishing communities for dried fish and seashells. This simple yet vital exchange established a trade network that spanned hundreds of miles, creating the stability required for their monumental building projects. They essentially built civilization on cotton and commerce. The echo of the music. Perhaps the most haunting and telling discovery at Coral is not the stone, but the sound. Archaeologists found a set of 32 flutes crafted from the bones of pelicans and condors. These were not simple whistles. They were beautifully carved, complex instruments. Imagine them playing, a unique music drifting through the valley, echoing from the massive sunken plazas where the populace would gather for ceremonies, not for battle. The absence of warfare, the presence of these complex instruments, the lack of a military class, suggests a type of ancient civilization that focused its energy entirely on ceremony, shared belief, and intellectual organization, rather than conquest. Coral was a society built on quiet spiritual power and trade, a forgotten counter-narrative to the history of war and empire we so often hear. A sudden and silent end. Like Göbekli Tepe, Coral did not slowly fade away. Around 1800 BCE, the city was abruptly abandoned. The monumental construction simply stopped. This sudden collapse occurred around the time of severe, prolonged drought and geological shifts in the valley, perhaps related to a massive El Niño event that devastated coastal resources and farming. The people of Coral did not bury their city, they just walked away from it. The great plazas were left silent, the massive stone pyramids abandoned to the dust. The sophisticated music died down, leaving only the sound of the wind. The story of Coral is the story of a civilization that achieved extraordinary heights in architecture and social organization, only to be erased not by an invading army, but by the indifferent cruelty of environmental change. The monuments remain, vast and silent, reminding us that there have been many starts, many great achievements that were wiped clean from our collective memory long before the first scribe ever picked up a stylus. The records were lost not because they were destroyed, but because they were never written down at all.
The mysteries of Göbekli Tepe and Coral show us that great civilizations existed before the written word. But what about the societies that did have writing, but whose records were suddenly, brutally erased? To understand this, we must travel to the tumultuous period around 1200 BCE, a cataclysmic era known to historians as the Bronze Age collapse. Imagine the Mediterranean and the Near East in this period. It was a time of interconnected, glittering empires. Egypt under its powerful pharaohs, the mighty Hittite Empire in Anatolia, the wealthy trading city of Mycenae in Greece, and the complex kingdoms of Mesopotamia and the Levant. They were united by vast trade routes, diplomacy, and a shared technology, bronze, an alloy of copper and tin. This was the first truly globalized world. Then, in the space of roughly 50 years, almost all of it burned. Every major city, from Mycenae to the Levant, was destroyed. The sophisticated writing systems were forgotten. The vast trade networks that supplied the crucial tin were severed. The palaces and knowledge centers simply vanished, plunging the entire region into a dark age that lasted for centuries. The unstoppable force, the Sea Peoples. Historians debate the exact cause of this massive, simultaneous collapse. Was it widespread drought, internal rebellion, or perhaps the inevitable failure of an over-centralized economy? All were likely factors, but one terrifying and constant presence dominates the fragmented records that remain: the Sea Peoples. They appear in Egyptian hieroglyphs as a terrifying wave of invaders, a confederation of seafaring raiders who suddenly began attacking the coasts of the eastern Mediterranean with relentless ferocity.
The few surviving inscriptions in Egypt describe them as foreign countries who made a conspiracy in their islands, and who were coming to land while their hands were filled with fire. No one knows who they truly were. Were they dispossessed refugees, fleeing famine and drought in their own lands? Were they organized pirates, exploiting the weakness of the massive empires? Were they a coalition of the very peoples the Mycenaeans and others had subjugated, now rising up in a massive, coordinated rebellion? Their names are ghostly: the Shurden, the Peliset, perhaps the ancestors of the Philistines, the Checker. They possessed a devastating new technology: iron weapons. While the old empires were still reliant on relatively soft bronze, the Sea Peoples arrived with the hardened steel of a new age, tearing through the defenses of the old world. The erased libraries. The true tragedy of the Bronze Age collapse is the loss of knowledge. When the great cities like Hattusa, the capital of the Hittite Empire, were sacked and burnt, their vast royal libraries, hundreds of thousands of clay tablets containing diplomatic treaties, laws, religious texts, and historical chronicles, were destroyed or scattered. The sophisticated linear B writing system of the Mycenaeans was simply abandoned. Literacy virtually disappeared from the Aegean region for the next 400 years. This was not just the end of an empire, it was the total, violent reset of recorded history. The vast historical context, the subtle details of trade, the complex diplomatic exchanges, all of it was reduced to a few vague Egyptian warnings about peoples of the sea. The Bronze Age was, in a sense, a lost civilization, not because it lacked writing, but because the knowledge was completely and deliberately erased by a period of chaos so severe that the survivors were forced to forget how to read. They had to start history again from zero. This pattern, civilization reaching a peak, only to be suddenly and catastrophically wiped clean by a combination of climate, internal weakness, and devastating external force, is the silent, recurring theme of history we rarely talk about. It shows that even a seemingly unbreakable global network can vanish almost overnight, leaving the survivors with only the broken whispers of a world that once was. We have now moved from the pre-agricultural lost world, Göbekli Tepe.
We have seen civilizations erased by cataclysm and by war. But sometimes the greatest loss is not of stone structures, but of pure knowledge. We now turn our attention to a library that has become the haunting symbol of all that humanity has forgotten: the Great Library of Alexandria. Imagine a city at the crossroads of the ancient world, Alexandria, Egypt, founded by Alexander the Great. Under the rule of the Ptolemies, this city became the beacon of intellect, housing a collection of scrolls that contained the entire known written output of the ancient world. It wasn't just a building, it was a state-sponsored, singular effort to amass all human knowledge in one place. Historians estimate that the library, at its peak, housed anywhere from 40,000 to over 400,000 scrolls. This vast collection was not just passively stored, it was an active research institution. Scholars from every corner of the known world, Greece, Persia, India, Babylon, came here to read, to debate, and to push the boundaries of science. The gold standard of ancient science. The greatest minds of the Hellenistic world walked these halls, and the achievements born here laid the foundation for disciplines that we use today. It was in Alexandria that Euclid codified his rules of geometry. Here, Eratosthenes calculated the circumference of the Earth with astounding accuracy, using simple geometry and the sun's shadow. Hipparchus made groundbreaking strides in astronomy, cataloging the stars. The library and the associated Mausoleon, Temple of the Muses, were the ancient world's university, observatory, and research laboratory rolled into one. It was a civilization defined not by its armies, but by its sheer intellectual ambition. The long, slow burn. The question that haunts us is simple. how did it all disappear? Unlike the sudden, fiery destruction of the Bronze Age cities, the loss of the Great Library was a long, slow tragedy. There wasn't a single great fire, but a series of destructive moments, each peeling away a layer of forgotten history. The most famous narrative points to Julius Caesar in 48 BCE. During a military siege, his ships were set ablaze in the harbor, and that fire supposedly spread, engulfing the main library. While a devastating event certainly occurred, most scholars now believe this only damaged the scrolls stored near the docks, not the entire main collection. The true loss was more insidious, a slow cultural decay. Funding cuts and intellectual drift. As the Roman Empire rose and the Ptolemaic dynasty weakened, the generous state funding for scholarship dried up. The quality of the scholars declined, and the acquisition of new scrolls slowed to a trickle. Religious and political conflict. In the centuries that followed, especially from the 3rd century CE onward, the rise of rigid new religions and political turmoil meant that any knowledge that contradicted popular or imperial belief was deemed dangerous. Scrolls were not always burned. Sometimes they were simply discarded or allowed to rot due to neglect, seen as irrelevant pagan wisdom. The daughter library's fate. The final major library associated with the Malzeon, the Serapeum, was likely destroyed in 391 CE under the order of Theodosius I as part of a crackdown on non-Christian temples. This was a clear act of cultural cleansing, where the ancient past was forcibly rejected by the new order. The Great Library of Alexandria was not conquered by a single fire. It was starved of funds, abandoned by scholars, and eventually targeted by ideological fervor. The true tragedy is not the thousands of scrolls we know were lost, but the knowledge we can only guess at. What medical breakthroughs were contained in the scrolls that disappeared? What lost histories of ancient North Africa? What philosophical texts were forever forgotten, forcing humanity to rediscover them centuries later during the Renaissance? The silent ruins of Alexandria whisper of a lost civilization of the mind, a memory of a time when the singular goal of a powerful state was the quiet, methodical collection of every single truth discovered by human ingenuity.
We have seen knowledge extinguished by fire and civilization shattered by cataclysmic events. Now, let us turn to the desert, a place where time moves at the pace of shifting dunes, and where history is slowly, silently buried alive. We journey to the vast, empty expanse of the Sahara Desert. Today, we see it as a colossal barrier, a place of extreme heat and lethal dryness, separating North Africa from the sub-Saharan world. But this barren landscape itself holds the memory of a very different time and the silent ruins of a lost network of civilizations. For thousands of years after the Younger Dryas period, the Sahara was not a desert. It was a vast, fertile grassland, a region known as the Green Sahara, or the African Humid period. This was a land of rivers, enormous freshwater lakes, and abundant wildlife, capable of supporting dense human populations. These people left behind stunning rock art, detailed depictions of hippos, giraffes, cattle, and fishermen, painting a picture of a civilization that thrived on water and life. But as the climate shifted, the rains moved south, and the Great Lakes began to evaporate. The people migrated, but some settlements attempted to hold on, creating unique societies built on the dwindling resources. It is the fate of these later societies, lost not to a single event, but to the slow, relentless march of desertification that we explore now. The Garamantes, masters of the underground rivers. In the arid heart of what is now Libya, archaeologists have uncovered the ruins of an entire forgotten empire, the Garamantes. This was a civilization that blossomed around 1000 BCE, right in the middle of the Sahara. Their existence defied all logic. How could a major, settled population thrive where there was no surface water?
The Garamantes were ingenious. They solved the problem by becoming masters of hydrology, the science of water movement. They engineered massive, subterranean water channels called fugaras. These were complex, miles-long tunnels dug deep into the rock to tap into fossil water, ancient groundwater reserves left over from the Green Sahara era. Imagine the organizational skill required, digging miles of underground tunnels with only simple tools, maintaining the channels and directing the water to support large, walled settlements and extensive agriculture. They were, in essence, the masters of an underground river system. Their civilization was a powerful force, controlling the lucrative trans-Saharan trade routes that connected the Roman world to the gold and resources of sub-Saharan world. They built magnificent stone tombs and large cities like Garama, boasting palaces and sophisticated bathhouses. They were known to the Romans, yet their history, their language, their internal organization, the knowledge of their vast underground engineering is almost completely lost. The silent trade and the final silence. The Garamantes Empire eventually faded, a victim of its own success and the relentless desert. The very fugaras that sustained them drew up the fossil water faster than nature could replenish it. The water table dropped, the tunnels became too deep or too dry to maintain, and one by one, the cities were abandoned. Their story is a haunting example of a civilization that reached a high level of technical achievement, only to be silently defeated by resource depletion and climate change. Their cities were not burned by enemies or drowned by floods. They were simply suffocated by sand. Today, their stone cities and the thousands of miles of their invisible underground water channels lie buried beneath the dunes. If you walk across the featureless expanse of the Libyan desert, you are walking directly over the complex, forgotten achievement of a people who mastered the earth and fought a losing battle against the sun. Their story is a warning, a whisper from the past, that even the greatest feats of engineering cannot defeat the long-term structural forces of a changing planet.
We have traveled across continents and timelines, witnessing the disappearance of societies buried under earth, sea, and sand. Now let us move to the extreme edge of the ancient world's imagination, where the known map fades into the white, frozen expanse of the Arctic Circle. This is the domain of myth, but where myth is most persistent, history often hides. We are speaking of the ancient Greek and Roman legends of Hyperborea and the medieval whispers of Thule. These names represent the civilizations lost to the north, a realm often described as a land of eternal sun, advanced people, and ultimate peacefulness, sealed away from the rest of the world by mountains of ice. The land beyond the north wind. The Greeks spoke of the Hyperboreans, literally the people beyond the north wind. They were described as a righteous, long-lived, and incredibly happy people living in a beautiful, sun-lit land where the golden age never ended. They were worshippers of Apollo, the god of light, and they were entirely untouched by war or disease. Historians have traditionally dismissed Hyperborea as pure fantasy, a philosophical ideal. Yet the persistent nature of the myth suggests that it may be the faint, garbled memory of a very real people. Could this be the ancient recollection of a society that thrived in the far north during a warmer geological period, perhaps before the full onset of the last ice age, when the circumpolar region was more hospitable? The legends suggest a civilization that had mastered harmony, a key characteristic we saw echoed in the peaceful, non-military nature of Karal. Their ultimate disappearance is implied, sealed away by a dramatic climate shift that made the land inaccessible, or perhaps frozen out of existence by the southward creep of the great ice sheets. The mysterious Thule. Centuries later, the mystery solidified around the name Thule, first documented by the Greek explorer Pytheas around the 4th century BCE. He claimed to have sailed 6 days north of Great Britain until he reached a land of perpetual twilight, where the water was neither sea nor ice, but a frozen slush, and the sun barely set. Pytheas' description was radical for his time and was largely disbelieved, yet the existence of Thule, or a northern civilization, became a fixed point in Western history and geography. It was thought to be the absolute northernmost habitable land, the edge of the known world. The true historical identity of Thule is fiercely debated. Was it Norway, the Shetland Islands, or perhaps even Iceland? The specific location is less important than the idea itself, that there were organized, self-sufficient communities existing at the very limits of human endurance, completely disconnected from the Mediterranean world's historical record. The people who lived there would have developed unique forms of survival, technology, and social structure based entirely on the marine environment and the unforgiving cold. When they eventually disappeared, either migrating south or simply being overwhelmed by environmental pressure, they left no writing, only the eerie echo of their name in the myths of warmer lands. The stories of Hyperborea and Thule represent the history that was literally frozen out of the narrative. They speak to the lost knowledge of human ingenuity in the face of extreme cold, and they are a powerful reminder that our concept of civilization must be broad enough to include those who thrived in places we now deem impossible.
Our exploration of lost civilizations often focuses on places, on monumental ruins or buried cities. But some of the most enduring mysteries center on people, entire populations who vanished from the historical record, leaving behind only tantalizing clues and persistent cultural memory. This brings us to the story of the 10 lost tribes of Israel, a profound event that fractured the ancient Israelite kingdom and created a vacuum in documented history that scholars and spiritual seekers have tried to fill for over 2 millennia. The story begins in the 8th century BCE. After the reign of King Solomon, the unified kingdom of Israel split into two: the northern kingdom of Israel, comprising 10 tribes, and the southern kingdom of Judah, comprising 2 tribes. The northern kingdom was wealthier but politically volatile. The Assyrian eradication. The collapse began with the rise of the terrifying Assyrian Empire, a military machine known for its brutal efficiency and its policy of mass deportation. Between 740 and 722 BCE, the Assyrian kings, particularly Tiglath-Pileser III and Sargon II, systematically conquered the northern kingdom of Israel. But the Assyrians didn't just conquer, they erased identities. Their standard policy was to forcibly remove the conquered population from their homeland and relocate them hundreds or thousands of miles away into distant parts of the empire, specifically to areas of Assyria, Media, and modern-day Iraq. This was done to break their national identity, destroy their military potential, and prevent any organized revolt. The 10 tribes, including Reuben, Simeon, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Ephraim, and Manasseh, were scattered into the vast, undocumented territories of the Assyrian realm, and there, their continuous, unified presence in the historical record ends. They did not leave behind tablets or chronicles detailing their journey. They simply vanished from the script. The Whispers of the Diaspora. What happened to them? The fate of these tribes is the ultimate lost peoples story, fueling endless speculation and debate. Assimilation. The most accepted scholarly theory is the most silent and simple. The majority of the deportees were absorbed into the massive populations of the Assyrian and later Babylonian empires. They married into local communities, adopted local customs and religions, and their distinct Israelite identity slowly dissolved over generations. Their loss was not a violent eradication, but a quiet cultural disappearance. Theories of migration. But the legends refuse to die. Across the centuries, countless groups have claimed descent from these lost tribes, keeping the mystery alive. Tales place them in the most remote corners of the globe: the Pashtun tribes of Afghanistan, the Mizo people of India's northeast, the Lemba people of southern Africa, or even groups in Ireland and Japan. These claims often rely on intriguing, though inconclusive, linguistic similarities, cultural practices like food taboos, or oral traditions passed down through thousands of years. The river Sambatyon. Perhaps the most haunting legend is that the lost tribes migrated beyond a mysterious, impassable river, the Sambatyon, a river of constantly churning stones, which only flows on the Sabbath, thus preventing the Jews from crossing and breaking the holy day. This myth represents a profound psychological state. The tribes are lost to the world, sealed away behind an impassable barrier, waiting for the end times to return. The story of the lost tribes is the story of a civilization whose history was violently uprooted and then atomized across the ancient world. They did not disappear behind a wall of ice or under a blanket of sand, but into the endless sea of humanity, leaving behind only the profound silence of their absence. Their history remains lost because it was shredded into 1,000 unreadable fragments.
We often imagine the Amazon rainforest as a pristine, timeless wilderness, a place where nomadic tribes lived simply, incapable of the large-scale societal organization found in the deserts or near rivers like the Nile. This perception, fueled by early European explorers, has long been the accepted historical truth. However, the Amazon, too, is a graveyard of sophisticated lost civilizations, swallowed not by water or sand, but by the relentless, all-consuming growth of the green canopy. The secret to uncovering this lost world lies not in the shovel and brush, but in light and laser technology. LiDAR, unveiling the lost cities. In recent years, archaeologists have employed a technique called LiDAR, light detection and ranging. This revolutionary tool is mounted on aircraft and fires millions of laser pulses down through the dense jungle canopy. These pulses map the ground level beneath the leaves with incredible precision, creating a three-dimensional map of the terrain as if the trees simply weren't there. What LiDAR is revealing has fundamentally reshaped our understanding of pre-Columbian South America. The empty Amazon was in fact once home to vast, complex urban networks. In the jungles of Ecuador and Bolivia, LiDAR has uncovered massive hidden structures that defy the myth of the noble savage. We are finding grid systems, carefully planned and straight roads, some running for miles, connecting major centers. This suggests centralized planning and organized communication. Massive earthworks, sophisticated deep defensive moats, monumental causeways, and huge earthen platforms built to elevate entire villages above the floodwaters. Agricultural complexity, large organized raised fields, an ingenious system for intensive farming in flood-prone areas, showing mastery of hydraulic engineering. These are not the temporary settlements of nomads. These are the remains of highly organized, powerful polities that existed centuries before European contact. The Cataclysm culture. Perhaps the most astonishing discovery came in the Bolivian Amazon, where LiDAR revealed the scale of the Cataclysm culture, which flourished between 500 and 1400 CE. This was not a few scattered villages. This was an urban sprawl. The central sites featured massive stepped pyramidal platforms surrounded by concentric moats that would have been filled with water, a mix of defensive works and ritual spaces. The size of the settlement suggests populations numbering in the tens of thousands, thriving in a complex, managed environment. The people of the Amazon mastered the world around them by creating black earth, or terra preta, a highly fertile human-made soil by mixing charcoal, pottery shards, and organic matter into the naturally poor Amazonian soil. They essentially engineered a civilization-sustaining ground that remains fertile even today. This was a form of technological mastery unique to the region. The final collapse. Like so many lost civilizations, the end of these Amazonian societies was swift and brutal, though not from the jungle itself. The greatest evidence points to the arrival of European diseases in the 16th century: smallpox, measles, and influenza. These diseases traveled faster than the explorers themselves, wiping out up to 90% of the native populations before the Europeans even set foot in the deep jungle. The massive populations were decimated. The vast, organized cities fell silent. Within a few decades, the carefully maintained roads, monumental platforms, and agricultural fields were swiftly and completely reclaimed by the forest. The jungle itself became the ultimate eraser, hiding the evidence of an entire epoch of human history. The story of the lost Amazonian cities is the story of a civilization that was not technologically inferior, but biologically vulnerable, leaving us with only the silent, LiDAR-scanned ghosts of their earthen architecture beneath the leaves.
We have traversed from the frozen north to the buried cities of the Amazon. Let us now explore the origins of American civilization, focusing on a society so foundational that it is often called the mother culture of Mesoamerica, the Olmec. The Olmec civilization flourished along the humid lowlands of the Gulf Coast of Mexico, roughly between 1500 BCE and 400 BCE. They emerged fully formed, a beacon of complexity, long before the Maya or the Aztecs. What makes the Olmec truly mysterious is not just how they rose so quickly, but why they vanished with such totality, leaving behind a profound intellectual legacy, but no written history of their decline. The Olmec were innovators. They invented or used key concepts that would define Mesoamerica for the next 2 millennia. The ritual ball game, the iconic rubber ball game played in sunken courts, originated with the Olmec. The zero and the calendar, the complex interlocking calendars and the concept of zero, crucial mathematical innovations were developed in this Olmec era. Monumental architecture. They were the first to construct massive religious centers with large earthen mounds and planned ceremonial spaces. The colossal heads and the silent rulers. The most recognizable and haunting legacy of the Olmec are the colossal heads. Imagine a stone sculpture carved from a single basalt boulder, standing up to 11 feet tall and weighing up to 50 tons. These are not stylized deities. They are meticulous, realistic portraits of powerful, stern-faced men wearing distinctive helmet-like headgear. 15 of these colossal heads have been discovered so far, each believed to be the portrait of a powerful Olmec ruler. What makes them so mysterious is not just how they rose so quickly, but why they vanished with such totality, leaving behind a profound intellectual legacy, but no written history of their decline. The Olmec were innovators. They invented or used key concepts that would define Mesoamerica for the next 2 millennia. The ritual ball game, the iconic rubber ball game played in sunken courts, originated with the Olmec. The zero and the calendar, the complex interlocking calendars and the concept of zero, crucial mathematical innovations were developed in this Olmec era. Monumental architecture. They were the first to construct massive religious centers with large earthen mounds and planned ceremonial spaces. The colossal heads and the silent rulers. The most recognizable and haunting legacy of the Olmec are the colossal heads. Imagine a stone sculpture carved from a single basalt boulder, standing up to 11 feet tall and weighing up to 50 tons. These are not stylized deities. They are meticulous, realistic portraits of powerful, stern-faced men wearing distinctive helmet-like headgear. 15 of these colossal heads have been discovered so far, each believed to be the portrait of a powerful Olmec ruler. What makes them so mysterious is not just how they rose so quickly, but why they vanished with such totality, leaving behind a profound intellectual legacy, but no written history of their decline. The Olmec did not vanish completely. Their traditions, gods, and innovations flowed into the subsequent Maya and Zapotec cultures. But the powerful, centralized civilization that erected the colossal heads was definitively lost. Their downfall was likely the result of ecological stress. The intensive agriculture necessary to feed the large populations may have exhausted the fertile river plains, leading to famine. Internal power struggle. The systematic defacement of the colossal heads points to a sudden political change, perhaps the end of a dynasty or the overthrow of the religious elite by the common people. The story of the Olmec is the history of a powerful, founding civilization whose script, the key to their rulers' names and their history, was lost when their very authority was violently rejected, leaving us only the silent, staring faces of their forgotten kings.
We have journeyed across the ruins of organized societies that predate writing, that were extinguished by climatic shifts, and that were simply swallowed by the earth and the jungle. Yet a final, crucial question remains. Are these disparate ruins merely separate failures, or are they the broken remnants of a single, ancient, global source? This is the question that leads us to the most powerful and controversial lost civilization of all, Atlantis. The story originates, famously, with the Greek philosopher Plato,
who wrote of it around 360 BCE. He claimed the story came to him through his ancestor, Solon, who heard it from Egyptian priests. Plato described Atlantis not as a primitive land, but as a technological marvel, a naval power located beyond the Pillars of Hercules or the Straits of Gibraltar, the city of rings and the sudden end. Plato's description of Atlantis is detailed and specific. He tells of a capital city built on a system of concentric rings of land and water, connected by massive bridges and canals. The Atlanteans possessed vast wealth, derived from minerals, gold, and a mysterious metal called orichalcum. Engineering prowess. They built vast harbors, docks, and complex hydraulic systems. Moral decay. Crucially, Plato wrote that the Atlanteans eventually succumbed to greed and militarism, losing their virtue. Their end was swift and total. Plato writes that the island of Atlantis was destroyed in a single dreadful day and night, swallowed by the sea through earthquakes and floods. While most modern scholars consider Plato's story to be a cautionary political allegory, a device to explore his theories on the perfect state, the details of its destruction are profoundly compelling. A highly advanced society wiped out by a massive sudden geological event. The real-world echoes of the myth. The enduring power of the Atlantis myth lies in its echo of real historical disasters we have already discussed. The Santorini eruption, Minoan civilization. The strongest geographical candidate for a real-world parallel is the volcanic eruption of Thera, Santorini, in the Aegean Sea around 1600 BCE. This eruption was one of the largest in human history, creating massive tidal waves and ash clouds that devastated the highly advanced Minoan civilization on nearby Crete. For the Minoans, their world did vanish in a day, matching the scale of the catastrophe Plato described. The Younger Dryas catastrophe. For those who place Atlantis much earlier, the memory of the Younger Dryas impact provides the perfect global mechanism for a lost civilization. If a high culture was wiped out around 10,000 BCE, as Göbekli Tepe suggests was possible, the memory of that global deluge and chaos could have been carried through the ages, ending up in the Egyptian scrolls that Solon found. The theory of diffusion. The Atlantis myth serves as the psychological anchor for the diffusionist theory, the idea that the striking similarities between disparate ancient cultures, pyramid building in Egypt and Mexico, complex astronomy in Babylon and the Maya, are not coincidences. Instead, they are the proof that these ideas must have spread from a single, lost mother culture, a global source like Atlantis. This theory suggests that the survivors of Atlantis, having witnessed the total collapse of their advanced world, sailed to distant, less developed shores, becoming the godlike teachers who jump-started civilization in Egypt, Mesoamerica, and India. In the end, whether Atlantis was real or simply a legend, it perfectly embodies all the themes of the lost civilizations we have explored: the triumph of human ingenuity, the terror of catastrophic collapse, and the tragic fact that even the greatest achievements can be completely erased by the passage of deep time, leaving us only with a faint, haunting whisper of what might have been. The unread silence of the Indus Valley. We have seen the physical remains of civilizations lost to the chaos of the past. Yet there is a distinct type of lost civilization, one whose entire historical record remains intact, perfectly preserved, but utterly inaccessible. This is the riddle of the Indus Valley civilization, or Harappan civilization, one of the world's three great cradles of civilization, alongside Egypt and Mesopotamia. Imagine a highly developed society that flourished across a massive territory encompassing modern-day Pakistan and northwest India from roughly 3300 BCE to 1300 BCE. It was a civilization defined by order, cleanliness, and quiet engineering, covering an area larger than any other Bronze Age culture. The great cities of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa reveal a mastery of urban planning that was not seen again for millennia. The grid. Cities were laid out on a precise geometric grid system, complete with wide, straight streets. Sanitation. They possessed the world's first known urban sanitation systems. Almost every house had its own bathroom, and an intricate covered drainage system ran beneath the streets, a feature utterly lacking in contemporary Mesopotamian or Egyptian cities. Standardization. Bricks were made in a standardized ratio, 4:2:1, across the entire civilization, suggesting a powerful, central economic and political authority. This was a quiet, stable, highly organized world. Yet what truly separates the Indus Valley from its contemporaries is the silence of its rulers. We have found no colossal statues of kings, no elaborate royal tombs, and no massive temple complexes dedicated to singular deities. Power in the Indus Valley seems to have been collective, possibly mercantile, and certainly peaceful. They left behind no evidence of warfare or great battles, no depictions of conquests or subjugated peoples. This civilization's history, the identity of its rulers, its political structure, and its religious beliefs, all of this is sealed away, locked behind the most frustrating mystery in archaeology, the Indus Script. The puzzle of the seals and the silence of the scribes. The Indus Script has been found on thousands of small carved steatite seals, miniature tablets, and pottery fragments. These seals, small, square, and exquisitely carved, are often found at major trade points, suggesting they were used for commercial purposes, perhaps stamping ownership or validating cargo. The script itself is made up of approximately 400 distinct signs, a number too large for a simple alphabet, but small enough to rule out the thousands of unique characters in Chinese. It is likely a logo-syllabic script, where symbols represent both words and syllables. The frustration lies in several key problems. Brevity. The average inscription is incredibly short, consisting of only about 5 signs. The longest inscription ever found is only 26 signs long. This lack of long texts, no royal decrees, no epic poems, no economic ledgers, makes cracking the language through statistical analysis extremely difficult. It's like trying to understand an entire library by reading only the one-sentence titles on the spines of the books. No Rosetta Stone. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphics, which were decoded using the Rosetta Stone, a single text written in 3 known scripts, the Indus Script has no known bilingual inscription. There is no accompanying text in a known ancient language, like Sumerian or Akkadian, to provide a key. The direction of reading. Scholars can't even definitively agree on the direction in which the script should be read. Is it right to left, left to right, or does it alternate? The answer to this simple question changes the potential meaning of every single symbol. The inability to read the script means we can only guess at the heart of this great lost civilization. Did they have a king, a council of elders, or a ruling class of merchants? What were their gods? What were their laws? The silence of the Indus Script is the definitive, quiet challenge to our historical record. We know the structures, the drains, the tools, the body of the civilization, but we cannot access its mind or its soul. Theories of sudden decline, the Aryan invasion, and climate change. The end of this civilization is nearly as mysterious as its language. By 1800 BCE, the great cities were in decline, and by 1300 BCE, the entire massive cultural structure had fragmented and disappeared. For decades, the leading theory was the Aryan invasion theory. This suggested that nomadic, Indo-European-speaking tribes swept down from Central Asia and violently conquered the peaceful, non-militaristic Harappans. This theory was based on the discovery of unburied skeletons in the final layers of Mohenjo-Daro. However, modern archaeology has largely discredited this simple invasion narrative. The skeleton showed signs of natural death or small-scale skirmishes, not a massive, decisive battle.
The modern consensus points instead to the greatest killer of lost civilizations: climate change and environmental stress. River migration. The Indus and its tributaries, particularly the Saraswati River, which may have been the lifeblood of the eastern settlements, began to change course or even dry up completely due to geological shifts and changing monsoon patterns. Resource strain. As the water dried up, large-scale agriculture failed, putting immense stress on the massive urban populations. The Indus Valley civilization did not end with a bang of war, but with the slow, agonizing, quiet withdrawal of the water itself. The great cities were not conquered, they were abandoned as people migrated east and south, seeking new water sources. The ultimate tragedy is double. A great, peaceful civilization vanished due to environmental collapse, and the only remaining record of its identity is locked forever behind a silent, unreadable script. The comfort of forgetting. We have spent hours together, journeying across the planet and spanning immense gulfs of time. We have stood at the deliberately buried stone rings of Göbekli Tepe, witnessing a spiritual awakening that preceded agriculture. We sailed across the Aegean to the burning ports of the Bronze Age collapse, seeing written history violently erased by the Sea Peoples. We listened to the unread silence of the Indus Script, a civilization whose entire identity remains locked away, and pondered the terrifying silence of the Amazonian cities swallowed by the green canopy. All these stories, from the whispers of Atlantis to the frozen legends of Thule, point to one profound, comforting truth. Humanity's story is not a straight line of ascent. It is a cyclical pattern of extraordinary achievement, sudden catastrophe, and eventual restart. The false comfort of the beginning. Our modern minds crave a clean, easy beginning. Mesopotamia, the Nile, the Greek philosophers. But the lost civilizations challenge this simplicity. They show us that the past is filled with false starts, with brilliant ideas that were lost forever, and with engineering that was forgotten. The realization is not frightening, it is deeply soothing. The pressure to be the pinnacle of history, the final, most advanced version of humanity, is a heavy burden. But when we look at the Olmec defacing their own rulers' heads, or the Garamantes watching their water dry up, or the people of Caral simply walking away from their silent pyramids, we see a recurring pattern. No civilization is permanent. The great power of time is its ability to reset. When the knowledge of Alexandria was lost, humanity did not stop. When the Bronze Age network collapsed, the survivors eventually learned to read and write again, leading to the Greeks and Romans. The forest reclaimed the Amazonian earthworks, preserving the soil for the next generation of life. The sleep of deep time. Think of the silence of these lost worlds as a form of cosmic rest. The Earth itself is a great archive, but it also provides a great oblivion. The sand, the ice, the jungle, and the ocean, these are not destroyers. They are curators of silence. They cover up the noise of human striving, the clamor of war, and the complexities of trade, allowing the world to breathe and begin anew. The final lesson of these lost civilizations is one of humility and continuity. We are not the first. We are not the last. We are simply the current inheritors of a world that has been built, rebuilt, forgotten, and rediscovered countless times. Our knowledge, our fears, and our struggles have all been lived out by others in silent cities we have yet to uncover. Let that thought bring you profound peace. The past is not a heavy weight, it is a deep cushion of time. The pressure is off. You can let your mind drift, knowing that the great story of humanity continues regardless of the details we remember or forget. The world will keep turning, the stars will keep shining, and the endless work of creation and forgetting will continue. Let the whispers of the lost cities fade now. Let the deep time wrap around you. Allow yourself to be quieted by the thought of the silent, unread scripts, the buried colossal heads, the frozen, fading legends. Your day is over. The search for history can wait. It is time to let the long, quiet narrative of the past guide you into deep, peaceful rest. Good night.